They hit me with a $50,000 fine for building a dam. The very dam that was saving their entire neighborhood from turning into a swamp, and they didn't just send a letter. They sent the law straight to my doorstep. It was a humid afternoon when the rumble of a police cruiser broke the calm of our cul-de-sac, its tires crunching, slowly over gravel as if announcing judgment. Before the officer even stepped out, Deputy Harris, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing sunglasses that reflected the entire neighborhood, walked up my drive with a stack of papers in his hand. His voice was low and rehearsed, like he'd said the same line 100 times before. "Mr. Miller, you're in violation of county code. You have 48 hours to tear down your structure or face criminal charges." And just behind him, like a director reveling in her play, stood Marlene Graves, the HOA president and self-proclaimed queen of our street, arms crossed, lips curled in a grin so smug it made my stomach turn. She waved a stack of papers at me, claiming they were county permits backing her case, but even from where I stood I could see the seals were crooked, blurred, and off-center. They looked like something spit out of a cheap printer, not a county office. But Marlene was already smiling as though she'd won, her eyes darting to the deputy as if to remind me she had authority on her side. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly documenting every shady move she made for months, because this wasn't the first time she'd tried to flex her power at my expense. The truth is, I hadn't built that dam for fun or out of defiance. I built it because for years our cul-de-sac drowned whenever spring rains came. The stormwater poured down the hill, turning lawns into lakes, destroying gardens, and rotting wooden sheds. I still remember the year George, my neighbor across the street, spent nearly $2,000 on a brand new riding mower, only for it to vanish in a tide of muddy water one stormy night. Clara, 2 houses down, once had her entire patio set float halfway down the block before we could chase it down. And every year we begged the HOA to fix the drainage, pleaded for a solution, and every year they shrugged us off, claiming it was too expensive or outside their scope of responsibility. But I was tired of excuses. So like any problem solver, I took matters into my own hands. Rock by rock, bag by bag, I built a modest, sturdy dam across the creek that ran behind our street. It wasn't flashy, but it was functional, redirecting the water into a controlled channel and saving every single property from flood damage. My neighbors cheered me on. Some even helped mix concrete. And when the first spring storm came, it worked like magic. For the first time in decades, our yard stayed dry. People stopped by to thank me. Some dropped off pies. Others shook my hand with gratitude. But the HOA, they didn't thank me. They came after me like I was a criminal. When the envelope with the $50,000 fine showed up, I almost laughed, thinking it had to be a typo. Maybe $500, which would have been outrageous enough, but $50,000? That was half my retirement savings, nearly everything I had built after 30 years in this house. At first, I thought it was some kind of clerical error. So I picked up the phone and called Marlene directly. I'll never forget her voice, sharp, clipped, dripping with condescension. "There's no mistake, Mr. Miller. You violated the rules. Pay the fine or we'll take further action." Then, just like that, she hung up. No explanation, no conversation, just a cold hammer dropped over the line. I stood there in silence, staring at the receiver, realizing in that moment this wasn't about rules at all. This was personal. After the deputy left me standing in my own driveway with that notice trembling in my hand, I knew I had to fight back. That night I sat at my desk, surrounded by piles of old HOA letters, storm photos, and muddy boots still caked from the creek, and started piecing together the story they didn't want told. I drafted emails to the entire board, attaching before and after photos of the floods, the detailed timeline of every storm we endured, even clips from my security camera showing the dam redirecting water safely. For good measure, I attached a diagram of the runoff flow I'd sketched by hand, proving beyond doubt the dam was helping, not hurting. Hours later, a single reply came through, not from Marlene, of course, but from David, the board's quietest member. His message was short, cautious, almost like he was afraid someone else might be reading. "Jack, I believe you, but Marlene won't back down. She's driving this. Maybe if you apologize, she'll reduce the fine. Please be careful." My stomach tightened. Careful? What exactly was I supposed to be careful of? Truth. David's warning was confirmation of what I already suspected. Marlene wasn't enforcing rules. She was building her own little kingdom, and I had just become her example. But then something caught my eye. The permits she'd waved in front of me during the deputy's visit. I studied the grainy, smudged copies they'd included in my violation packet, and immediately I noticed inconsistencies. mismatched fonts, regulation codes that didn't even exist, and most damning of all, a county seal that didn't match the real one I'd seen dozens of times before. My confusion hardened into cold anger. These weren't permits, they were forgeries. She hadn't just stretched the rules, she'd committed fraud to weaponize the law against me. And if she could forge county documents, how many other homeowners had fallen victim to her games without realizing it? I decided to call in backup. I reached out to Maya Torres, an old friend from my years at the power plant who'd spent her career as a civil engineer. She came by the very next day, still in her steel-toe boots, carrying a clipboard and a rolling case of tools. Maya inspected the dam herself, ran a few tests on the concrete, and then laughed out loud at the so-called permits Marlene had forged. "Jack, these are a joke," she said, flipping the papers over like they were garbage. "Wrong formatting, non-existent ordinance codes. This isn't just sloppy, it's insulting." She spent hours with me in the backyard, setting up water gauges, running flow simulations, even drawing up a scaled engineering diagram of the creek. By evening, she had written up a professional 2-page report stamped with her license number, declaring the dam a safe and effective gravity weir, a kind of speed bump for water, designed to slow runoff and prevent flooding downstream. With Maya's report in hand, I felt like I finally had ammunition. I drafted a formal letter to the HOA, attaching her report, side-by-side comparisons of the forged seals, and copies of my security footage. I told them plainly, rescind the fine and issue an apology, or I would escalate the matter to the county and the local news. I hit send, sat back, and waited for their retreat. But Marlene didn't retreat. She counterattacked. 2 days later, I found a brand new violation notice stuffed into my mailbox. $5,000 for installing an unauthorized surveillance system. She was talking about the single security camera I had mounted in my backyard, the one aimed at the creek, collecting the evidence she hated. But the real kicker came when I noticed 2 new cameras suddenly bolted to the lamppost across the street. Both pointed directly at my house. My own footage caught Marlene standing on the sidewalk with a technician, handing him papers and directing him where to aim them. She was staging surveillance, turning my quiet street into something out of a dystopian movie. Then came Tom Reynolds. He was Marlene's enforcer on the board, built like a linebacker, always with a clipboard in hand, the kind of guy who thought his scowl could silence anyone. He showed up one afternoon, announced he was there to inspect the dam, and spent less than 30 seconds walking around before scribbling something on his sheet and leaving without a word. My hidden mic recorded the whole thing, 30 seconds. No measurements, no real inspection. That evening, another email arrived. Structural instability confirmed. $5,000 fine. I sat staring at my laptop screen, a mix of rage and disbelief flooding through me. They weren't just enforcing fake rules. They were creating false realities, writing fiction on official letterhead and daring anyone to question it. And as if that wasn't enough, Marlene spread her reach further. Clara got a violation for her mailbox, being the wrong shade of beige. George was fined because his grass was half an inch too tall. Another family down the street got cited for leaving their trash bin visible for an extra hour. The pattern was clear. Marlene wasn't just coming for me anymore. She was punishing everyone who dared to stand near me. That night, sitting under the dim light of my kitchen, I realized this was bigger than me. It wasn't just about my dam or my fine or even my house. It was about an entire neighborhood living under the thumb of a bully with a fake rule book and a taste for power. And for the first time since the envelope arrived, I wasn't scared. I was angry. And anger, I knew, could be fuel. The breaking point came the following week, when the county inspector finally showed up, except he didn't look like any inspector I'd ever seen. He pulled into my driveway in a dusty sedan with no county logo, stepped out in plain clothes, and carried nothing but a clipboard. No badge, no official ID, not even a hard hat. "Here for the dam inspection," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. When I asked for credentials, he fumbled in his pocket, flashed something that looked suspiciously like a laminated library card, and hurried straight to the creek. He didn't measure, didn't take photos, didn't even touch the dam, just scribbled notes furiously like he was playing a part. I recorded the whole thing on my phone. Later that night, I showed the footage to Maya. She shook her head, furious. "That's not a county inspector. That's a stooge. Jack," she planted him. Sure enough, 2 days later, another letter arrived. Dam declared unsafe by county inspection. Immediate removal required. Non-compliance will result in lien placement. The letter even bore the county seal, but this time, I recognized the same mismatched font and photocopied signature I'd seen before. Marlene was doubling down on forgery, brazenly pretending her imposter's notes carried legal weight. My hands shook as I read it. Not from fear, but from the sheer audacity. She thought she could just invent reality and the rest of us would bow. That night, Clara came over, tears in her eyes. She'd been fined $2,000 for unapproved gardening modifications. Her crime? Planting roses along her walkway. "Jack, I can't pay this," she whispered, clutching the violation letter. "I don't know what she wants from me." George followed soon after, waving a notice about his shed, apparently the same shed the floods had ruined months earlier was now structurally unsound and racking up fines. One by one, neighbors began showing up on my porch like refugees, each holding papers, each carrying the same defeated look. Marlene wasn't just targeting me anymore, she was terrorizing everyone. That's when it hit me. She wanted isolation. By finding my allies, she hoped to scare them into silence, leaving me to fight alone. But instead, it had the opposite effect. We gathered in my garage one evening, folding chairs arranged in a circle, paperwork spread across an old workbench. Maya brought her laptop, George brought his storm photos, Clara brought her stack of violation letters, and David, the quiet board member, finally showed up, trembling but determined. "I can't keep quiet anymore," he confessed. "She's been forging documents for years. She rewrites meeting minutes, invents ordinances, and even threatened me once. When I asked too many questions, he pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. This has every board email for the last 3 years. Read them." What we uncovered was worse than we imagined. Dozens of emails showed Marlene coaching Tom on how to inspect properties to guarantee fines. Others revealed she'd pocketed HOA funds for beautification projects that never happened. One chain even showed her bragging about creative paperwork, convincing a bank to back off during a foreclosure. She was running a racket, using forged authority to squeeze families dry while disguising it as neighborhood management. My dam was just her latest weapon, a high-profile spectacle meant to remind everyone who held the power. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office with Maya's report, the fake inspector footage, and David's email archive. The clerk at the desk raised her eyebrows higher with every page she flipped. "These seals aren't ours," she confirmed. "And this man," she said, pointing to a photo of the so-called inspector, "doesn't work for the county. He never has." She promised to forward everything to the legal department. For the first time, I felt like the tide was turning. But Marlene wasn't finished. That evening, as thunder rolled in and rain hammered the windows, I heard a loud pounding at my door. It was Tom Reynolds, drenched from the storm, holding a letter high like it was a victory flag. "You've been officially ordered to demolish the dam," he barked. "You've got 48 hours, or we'll do it for you and charge triple." His voice carried down the block, making sure every neighbor heard. I stood in the doorway, camera in hand, recording every word. "Tom," I said calmly, "that letter's fake, and so is your authority. You can tell Marlene she's running out of rope." His smirk faltered just slightly before he stomped off into the rain. That night, sleep was impossible. The storm raged, the creek swelled, and my phone buzzed constantly with texts from neighbors. Water levels rising, sump pumps failing, basements flooding. Yet through it all, the dam held steady, doing exactly what I built it to do, protect us. And I couldn't shake the thought that Marlene wasn't just fighting me anymore. She was fighting reality itself. And reality, sooner or later, always wins. By morning, the neighborhood was unrecognizable. The storm had hammered us through the night. And when I stepped outside, the air was heavy with the smell of wet earth and gasoline from drowned lawnmowers. The cul-de-sac looked like a war zone. Trash bins floating down the street, fences leaning sideways, kids' bikes half submerged in mud. But the dam held. The creek swelled high, roaring like a living thing. But the water slowed at the barrier, trickling safely into the drainage ditch instead of spilling into yards. For the first time in years, the houses were spared, every house except mine. Because sometime in the dead of night, someone had sabotaged the dam. I found fresh tool marks on the concrete and a jagged crack across the base, as if someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. Water had begun leaking through, soaking my backyard like a swamp. My security footage confirmed it. 2 figures in rain ponchos, one tall and broad-shouldered, the other shorter, moving under the cover of lightning flashes. They worked fast, striking the dam before vanishing into the storm. And even through the blur of rain, I recognized the broad-shouldered silhouette. It was Tom. By noon, the county investigator called me. They had reviewed my footage, the forged documents, and David's email archive. "Mr. Walker," the voice on the line said, steady and professional, "this is more serious than we expected. What you've provided constitutes fraud, forgery, and possibly conspiracy to defraud homeowners. We'll be opening a formal case immediately. Relief washed through me, but it was short-lived. 2 hours later, deputies showed up, not to arrest Marlene, but to serve me with a court summons. The HOA, using their forged inspection report, had filed an emergency motion to force demolition of the dam, claiming it posed an imminent public hazard. I stood there in the rain-soaked driveway, clutching the papers while neighbors peeked from their windows. To them, it must have looked like I was the criminal. That night, the neighborhood gathered in George's garage. 30 people crammed shoulder to shoulder, dripping from the storm. Clara spoke first, her voice shaking with anger. She tried to find me for roses, and now she's sabotaging dams in the middle of the night? When does it end? Others chimed in, stories of unexplained fees, sudden fines, threats slipped into mailboxes. A young couple admitted they'd been threatened with foreclosure after missing one payment, even though the HOA had no such authority. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened. Marlene had turned our community into her personal kingdom, and we'd all been paying tribute without realizing it. That was when George, usually the calmest among us, slammed his fist on the workbench. Enough is enough. If the county won't shut her down fast enough, we will. Let's take this public. Heads nodded all around. Someone suggested contacting a local news station. Another mentioned recording testimonials. And within minutes, a plan had formed. We would flood the public with the truth the same way the storm had tried to flood us, with overwhelming force. The next morning, Clara uploaded the first video, her holding up violation letters, voice-breaking as she described being fined for roses. Then George posted photos of his ruined shed alongside new fines. Others followed, short clips, scanned letters, angry testimonies. By the end of the day, our neighborhood Facebook group had exploded, and the story was spreading across town. Reporters started calling. One even showed up at my doorstep, umbrella in hand, notebook ready. "Is it true your dam saved the neighborhood while the HOA tried to tear it down?" she asked. I handed her Maya's report, the forged inspection letter, and the sabotage footage. She left, shaking her head in disbelief. The story aired that night on local news. HOA accused of forgery and retaliation against homeowner who prevented flooding. They played the footage of Tom at the dam, my neighbors' testimonials, even clips of the fake inspector. The anchor's closing line said it all. Tonight, questions remain about who is really protecting this community. The HOA, or the man they're trying to silence. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Strangers honked as they drove past my house, giving me thumbs up. A GoFundMe appeared online to help with my legal costs. And most importantly, the county issued an emergency injunction, no demolition of the dam until the fraud investigation was complete. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But Marlene wasn't finished, not by a long shot. That same evening, I found an anonymous flyer taped to my door. A grainy photo of my house with the words, "Unsafe, hazard, danger," to children. Someone was trying to turn the tide of public opinion to make me the villain again. I crumpled it in my fist, but deep down I knew the fight wasn't over. Marlene had ruled with fear for years, and people like that don't surrender quietly. She was cornered now, and a cornered tyrant is the most dangerous kind. The flyer was just the beginning. Within days, new rumors spread like wildfire, anonymous posts on neighborhood forums claiming my dam was a death trap, whispers at the grocery store that I'd been profiting off the HOA by charging neighbors secretly, even a fake voicemail supposedly from a county inspector warning that I could be arrested any day. It was pure smear, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Marlene wasn't fighting fair anymore. She was fighting dirty, clawing for survival as the walls closed in. And for a while, it almost worked. Some neighbors who had spoken up fell silent, afraid of becoming targets themselves. A few even pulled their posts down, terrified she'd retaliate with liens or lawsuits. It felt like the momentum we'd built was slipping through our fingers. Then the break came. Late one night, David, the board member, who had quietly warned me months earlier, showed up at my house with a folder tucked under his jacket. His hands shook as he set it down on my kitchen table. "I can't keep this secret anymore," he whispered. Inside were copies of board meeting minutes, unfiled invoices, and Marlene's personal notes. They showed years of shady accounting. Fake fines funneled into a maintenance fund that didn't exist. HOA credit cards used for vacations, even cash withdrawals at casinos. It was a paper trail straight into her pocket, and it explained everything. Marlene wasn't just power-hungry, she was robbing the community blind. The next morning, I made copies and delivered them directly to the county investigator. That same afternoon, the sheriff's office rolled into the neighborhood, not to threaten me this time, but to raid Marlene's house. Blue lights flashed for hours as deputies carried out. boxes of documents, and computer equipment while neighbors gathered on the sidewalks in stunned silence. Tom tried to block the driveway at first, puffing up his chest like always. But even he backed down when he saw the warrant in the deputy's hand. By sunset, Marlene was in handcuffs, shoved into the back of a cruiser as cameras rolled. The same news station that had first aired my story now broadcast her downfall live, and the headline said it all. HOA president arrested in fraud and forgery scandal. The days that followed felt surreal. The board scrambled to resign one by one, leaving only David, who had finally done the right thing. An emergency meeting was held, and this time the community packed the clubhouse wall to wall. People who had once been silent now shouted from the floor, demanding reform. By unanimous vote, the old bylaws were scrapped. New rules were drafted with full transparency, limits on fines, mandatory receipts, and open books for everyone to see. It wasn't just about fixing the dam. Anymore, it was about taking back our neighborhood. With the HOA neutered and the county investigation underway, we finally turned back to the creek. This time we did it right. With a legitimate county permit in hand and Maya overseeing the work, the dam was rebuilt, not by one man, but by the entire community. George mixed concrete with his teenage son. Clara brought food to keep everyone going. Kids painted wooden signs warning to stay clear of the construction. Even neighbors who had doubted me showed up, eager to be part of something bigger than fear. And when the last stone was set, we didn't just build a dam, we built a symbol of unity, a promise that no one person could ever hold us hostage again. The following spring, the real test came. Another heavy storm rolled through, the kind that used to turn our cul-de-sac into a swamp. I stood on my porch with Sarah, watching the rain slam into the creek. The water rose, pushed against the dam, and for a tense moment I held my breath. Then it slowed, diverted smoothly into the channel we'd carved. Yards stayed dry, basements safe. Kids laughed under umbrellas instead of crying over ruined toys. The dam held stronger than before, and so did we. As neighbors cheered, Maya handed me a cold beer and smirked. She really thought she could bully a creek, she said. I chuckled, eyes fixed on the water rushing harmlessly past. You can't vote against gravity, I replied. And in that moment it hit me, this wasn't just about me winning against Marlene. It was about an entire neighborhood learning to stand up to corruption, to lies, to fear. Marlene had tried to bury me under fines, forged papers, even the law itself. But in the end, it was her empire of deceit that collapsed under its own weight. So here's the question I'll leave you with. What would you do if the very people who tried to destroy you came crawling back, begging you to save them? Because when the water rose and the truth came out, that's exactly what happened to me. And let me tell you, the look on Marlene's face as she realized her power was gone forever, that was worth more than $50,000. Subscribe to HOA's Mind for 1 year of good luck.